Bom dia, boa tarde, and boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today blog, as well as the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So today I am revisiting a video, or rather a post that I did back in May of 2014. Um, I just want to go over some of the material because even though some of the material might be older, it's still very relevant to understanding Brazilian society today. So today I'm discussing this piece that was called "Being Mixed Doesn't Make Me Less Black" and compliments that devalue Blackness by exalting European attributes. Basically, what's going on here is that a young lady wrote an article online where she talked about how it took her a while to come into her Black identity. And along the way, oftentimes people would compliment her on her mixedness, if you will, and just how her physical appearance distanced her from Blackness. Um, it's often considered a compliment when people say, "Oh, well, you're not actually Black. You're not so Black. You're more of a morena. You're more of a mulata." And there's always this thing where if you're considered attractive, you should not define yourself as Black. And it's just something that you hear in Brazil all the time. And um whereas before you just heard this most among like social scientists, anthropologists, sociologists just reporting on Brazil. But with the emergence of social media, social networks, blogs, websites, more and more just average everyday Brazilians were, you know, reporting on their experiences with this, how within their own families, Blackness was something that was so considered so negative that no one wanted to define themselves as negro or preto, both of these terms meaning Black in Portuguese. But in the last, even though Black identity politics have been going on in Brazil for, you could say back all the way back to the 1940s or so, it's been in the last 20 years where it's really exploded. And I would say, really, in the last 15 years, with the rise of social media, that people of African descent have been able to have this open discussion about their experiences and being able to look beyond how Brazil like to present itself as a racial democracy. Because once you look beneath that racial democracy and you see how people are treated based on their distance or proximity to this European standard, then you start to uh, let's say pull the curtain back on how people really see race in Brazil. Um, so by looking at some of these people's experiences, it gave me a better understanding because these people were able to start speaking for themselves, and as opposed to uh, some of these reports coming out in books. You go back to the 1940s and 50s, and you have just like numerous books that were coming out written by Brazilian scholars as well as non-Brazilian scholars talking about race in Brazil. And the question was, how can these social scientists find this going on and then the country itself among the citizens still continue this idea like, no, we don't have this problem here. That's a problem in South Africa and the United States. We're all mixed here, so we don't have these type of problems. So this woman, like many other Brazilian women of African ancestry, whether mixed or, you'll say all Brazilians are mixed to some degree, some more, some less. But you see a lot more people stepping forward and say, look, calling me other terms besides negra, negro, or, preto, pretinha, these type of terms, you're trying to diminish my Blackness by saying, if you're attractive, you shouldn't call yourself that. That's considered an insult. So people are slowly retaking that identity, like no, and they're wearing it as a badge of pride. So this is a piece again from 2014, and the young lady who wrote this article, her name is I believe it's Stephanie Pies, and a lot of the articles I would see on these blogs, they were just really revealing about how people saw themselves and how they went through this process of identity. A lot of the Black women went through a process of accepting their natural hair, because that's another stigma in Brazil. Like, you want to be attractive, you can't walk around the streets with your hair looking like that. The so-called natural Afro textured hair, what they call cabelo crespo, which basically means kinky curly hair. Um, People would do anything to try to cover up the texture of their hair, and this is another thing we've seen in the last 15 years or so, where 15 to 20 years, you just see this rise of people accepting their natural hair. Matter of fact, the woman in this article that I'm talking about today, there's another article I posted by her where she completely shaved her head. Um, it was an intriguing article because she was saying how, not only was some of the chemical treatments that she was doing to her hair, was it damaging her hair, but a lot of people, by making certain quote unquote compliments to her, she realized, like, you're trying to make me better than the rest of my people. And, Black people have all different types of textures of hair, but the further you are away from the tightest, kinkiest curl, the more, even though within that context, you're still not fully accepted, because straightness is the standard. So she didn't want to play that game anymore. So she just completely cut her hair off, almost completely bald. And that was another intriguing article by this same woman. So let's get into this article right now. Again, from 2014. Today's piece, like so many others, is exactly what this blog is about. Stephanie Pies covers so many issues that are pertinent to the comprehension of Blackness from the Brazilian perspective. Hair texture, racial mixture, and compliments, quote unquote compliments, that simultaneously mask racist sentiments are all covered here. In this piece, Stephanie Pies takes the reader through the many complexities of the development of Black identity and the development of Black consciousness. In Brazil today, there are thousands, if not millions, of young women that do all in their power to disassociate themselves from Blackness. If one has a looser type of curl or brown skin on the lighter side of the spectrum, the Brazilian racial ideology questions any person with such a phenotype about why they would choose to define themselves as negra, because they are too pretty to be Black. With consciousness, Pies is able to perceive when a quote unquote compliment hides subtle racism, when so many others would simply rejoice in being seen as less Black or not being considered Black at all, as simply a compliment because they don't want to carry this quote unquote stigma. She also touches upon the mixed but Black but mixed theme from a few years ago, showing that being both does not have to be a contradiction. It's a worthwhile read that we are happy to present to you. Now, before I get into Stephanie Pies' article, I also want to discuss something that, I've talked about and what I mentioned just now. The idea of, well, you're too pretty. Why would you define yourself as Black? You're a morena, you're a mulata. Don't call yourself Black. That's an insult. So in 2012, a well-known actress named Camila Pitanga, she spoke on this about she feels violated when people question why she defines herself as Black, right? Camila Pitanga is a popular actress. You'll see her in a lot of, novellas, which Brazilians call soap operas. She's been on the scene for quite a while. Her father is famous, Antonio Pitanga. He's a longtime actor going all the way back to the 60s and 70s. And Camila Pitanga speaks on this. Why are you always questioning? I choose to identify myself as Black, even though society says you shouldn't call yourself this. So she spoke about this. This is Camila Pitanga talking. She says, it may be strange, but sometimes I'm embarrassed for not having remarkable stories of racism in my life. As much as I insist on reaffirming my Black roots, people always think the opposite. It's very uncomfortable, and it is as terrible as the most pure prejudice. From the moment I became known to the general public, the situation became even more evident. I'm used to being stopped in the streets by people who find it strange the fact that my skin is light, my features are aquiline, and my hair straight. They ask why I insist on saying that I am Black despite being, quote unquote, so cute. It's absurd. It's as violent as if I was being barred from a restaurant or a hotel because of my color. I am very much like my mother, the former model, Vera Lucia Manais, who has my color. My father, Antonio Pitanga, is Black. There were times when I was very saddened by this attitude, but today I face this more naturally. I don't care. For example, the comments that I heard after being on the cover of Hasa Brazil magazine. Some fans wrote and said that they did not understand the fact of me being interviewed by a publication directed towards blacks. I repeat, I am black. Um, so she mentioned Hasa Brazil magazine, which I've done a video about. It's the most successful and still now more than 25 years, 20, I think it's 26 years it's been on the market now. It remains the only magazine on any Brazilian newsstand that's directed towards the black population. It's the most popular and it's the one that's been the most successful over the years. So that's Camila Pitanga's take on this whole thing. So let's get into Stephanie Pye's article, which she calls, "But your hair is so beautiful." She says, "I know that it is, and I only understand the time I needed to take account of this. Her hair is crespo, meaning kinky curly. It has gone through several phases, natural and later chemical changes, but it never stopped being crespo. When I was a kid, it had little curls and was huge until the sad night in which my mother, tired after a day of work and not managing to detangle my ends, silently took scissors and cut my curls without telling me. After that, my hair started to change. And I don't know if it was because of cutting it or because of natural hormonal influences, but it never ceased to be what it is. Crespo, again, meaning kinky curly. A brief summary of my journey of acceptance. When I was a child, my hair was always referred to in a negative form. The preferred nickname of those evil people of that age was the infamous bombril, meaning steel wool hair. Now, sidetrack, bombril is a popular cleaning product that people use in Brazil. It's like a scouring pad that you use to clean your pots and pans. For years in Brazil, it's been very common that people with kinky curly or what we call crespo hair, they people will call them cabelo de bombril, comparing their hair to this steel wool cleaner that you use to scour your pots and pans. You know, there's a number of articles where I've discussed this. So you notice that if you look at this woman's hair, again, let's look at this again. Now, in the United States, people would probably look at her and say, "Oh, she's got good hair," at least in the black community. I mean, many of us have heard about this quote unquote Brazilian hair. You have weaves that have been made out of Brazilian women's hair. It's like people who are familiar with hair textures that they sell for weaves. They're familiar with what's called Brazilian hair. But understand, in Brazil, it's a whole different thing. It's like because they're on such a European standard, even having a looser curl, this is considered like ugly hair. It might be a little bit quote unquote better than those who have kinkier hair, but still, nonetheless, the standard is straight. So this girl, even having quote unquote what a lot of Black Americans would consider good hair, they still compared her hair to bombril, again, a steel wool scouring pad that use to clean your pots and pans. So she goes on. I didn't need any discriminatory comments to know that I was not the rule. I was the exception. I'm from Curitiba. The Black parcel is extremely small in our population compared with the national average. Now, Curitiba is the capital city of the state of Paraná in southern Brazil. It's one of the three states that's considered the whitest and most European section of the country. And Curitiba, if I'm not mistaken, I think the population of Curitiba is about 20% preto pardo, which means black and brown. Again, in the Brazilian context, a lot of people consider brown to be a separate category, whereas black activists say pardos or brown people or people of some degree of mixed race should be considered part of the black population. So between preto and pardo, they say the population in Curitiba is right around 20% non-white. So she's saying, I didn't recognize myself in the streets or in magazines or novellas, which are the soap operas. Basically, she's saying I didn't see many people that look like me in the soap operas or in the magazines. Generally, you see black and brown women on Brazilian novellas. They're portrayed as some type of, sexy, sexually alluring woman, or they're shown as the help, either a maid or a cook. Most of the novellas you'll see, these are the roles that, I'll just say black women, because whether they're lighter skinned or they're darker skinned, this is how they're portrayed in Brazil's media. I didn't need the jokes and giggles to understand that I was not considered normal. I was a something else. And one day I understood that they would always treat me as something else. At age 11 or 12, at 11 or 12 years of age, I found the solution to at least one of these quote unquote problems. That was a brush and a flat iron. I learned to do it myself and spent years with straight hair every day. Then there came a moment when I really didn't remember what my natural hair looked like. I only saw the reflection of an illusion in the mirror. One day, a tuft, they weren't little strands, they were really a tuft of hair, just fell out of my bangs. I found myself forced to stop using the relaxer that helped undo the curls and put the dryer and flat iron to the side, or I would have to see my hair breaking and falling out in a tuft after tuft until I would eventually go bald. After 3 months of not harming my tresses, I don't remember exactly how, I saw my reflection in a mirror, and thus out of nowhere, I liked what I saw. That's how I learned to love my hair. It was forced. Some years of rejection were needed. And when I realized how gorgeous my hair was, the outrage or revolt came. First, I was outraged against myself. How did I let others do this to me? How did I let the pressure and dissatisfaction of others with the hair that was not only mine affect me this way? Later, I was revolted with people that in some way led me to this. And I was finally revolted with our racist culture. My apparition as natural, my apparition as natural after the episode of my hair falling out was really forced. I had no other option. But then came a moment when I decided I would carry in my head my resistance. Today, it is 5 years that I assumed or accepted my natural hair. I am proud of who I am, and I know that if I pass this sensation on to other people, today, calling my hair bombril will not make me the isolated child, isolated at lunch, or force me to go home fast to quote unquote do something with this hair. Today, racism comes in a different, almost subtle way, which is something I've heard for years. It used to always amaze me how people say, the racism in Brazil is somehow subtle or veiled. Because if you listen to the things that people say on a regular basis, like how do you consider that veiled? It's very much open and to the way that I see it. Um, Continuing on with this article, what I hear now with one or another variation is the following sentence. Your hair is so beautiful. It's a little cacheadinho, curly, not those ugly naps. What is the problem with this sentence? One, slandering a phenotypic characteristic of my race, you are slandering me. It doesn't matter if you think that because my hair has a looser curl that it automatically ceases to be crespo. In fact, even if my hair was naturally straight, I don't cease being black and you would still be slandering me. Two, by exalting a feature that makes clear my miscegenation or racial mixture and not allowing the black phenotype to be manifested completely, you are valuing my embranquecimento or white attributes. Now, she uses the word embranquecimento here, meaning whitening, meaning referring to the process that a lot of black families have gone through in which, because of what they've been taught, you should desire to marry people with a whiter phenotype so that your kids come out whiter. And this is something that's been going on for over probably, I'd say, 130 years since, like, when slavery was coming to an end in 1888. This is the idea that elites came up with to get rid of some of these black people. We should enforce, not so much enforce, but put it in the consciousness of non-white people that you should desire for your children to come out whiter than you. So eventually we'll have a whiter Brazil. So this is what she's saying. The so-called the miscegenation and the embranquecimento by people making compliments on her not being so black, people look at that as a compliment. And this is what she's saying. By you telling me this, by people trying to devalue her blackness, people telling her you shouldn't define yourself as black, you are valuing and overvaluing her European influences in her appearance. She goes on. I'm not saying it's bad to have a non-black feature. I'm saying that when you use it to say that my hair is better than another more genuinely kinky hairstyle or texture, you're actually being racist. Three, Your notion of beauty is not necessarily a personal opinion. It is taught. That's key that she says that because people pick up these views because of what society teaches them. A lot of Black families have whitened over the generations because this was instilled in the Black community that you should desire to have whiter offspring, right? People a lot of say, amor no tem cor, love has no color. But when you look at a lot of the entertainers, black entertainers, the vast majority, male and female, have white partners. That's a whole nother topic I'll get into in another video. But let's go on with what she's talking about. Again, your notion of beauty is not necessarily a personal opinion. It is taught. When you say that cabello crespo, curly kinky hair, is ugly, you're propagating a bias that is imposed. Why do so many people use the same sentence? Is it the opinion of people that are really like that? Or is there a culture that has always taught you that cabello crespo is ugly? Again, cabello crespo being meaning kinky curly hair. Racism is cruel. When it wants to demean me, it assumes that my hair is crespo in order to put me in an inferior and stigmatized position. When it wants to exalt my white characteristics and ends up the same way, inferiorizing my race, it says that my hair is not crespo and that's why it's beautiful. It also speaks of my delicate nose and the tone of my skin. One doesn't even dare correct someone who calls you a morenina on the street. It's a compliment. Clearly, you're not negra or Black. Negra is negra, but you're morena. This is, again, this game of terms that people use in order to push people further away from accepting a Black identity. People will call people this term morena or little morena, meaning morenina, saying, you're too pretty to be considered Black. Why would you consider yourself negra or preta? That's not something you want to be. So in this way, what she's saying is that by you calling me morenina, you are devaluing the possibility that she is Black and thus devaluing Blackness. But generally, people in the streets don't see it that way because Black is really seen as a stigma. You should avoid being Black at all costs, which is what's impressive about what's happened in Brazil in the last 20 years with people slowly adapting this Black identity. Continuing, do I like compliments? Of course I do. From people that I know, people who have this freedom and don't use the supposed glorification of some physical attribute as a basis to further segregate the population. So far, I haven't talked about compliments. You know what a compliment would be? Your hair is so beautiful. Now, if you want to compare me to someone of my own race to value my European or Asian features, while at the same time undervaluing the image of Black women, I'll find this negative indeed. My hair is beautiful, but not because it is less crespo. It's beautiful because it's mine. And it not only carries the identity that I had lost in childhood, it carries my cry of protest. It throws in the face of Brazilian racism that I am not less of a woman for being Black, nor less Black for being mestiza or mixed. Over time, I realized who I am and I learned to love myself. Now, this is something that this has been going on. I'd say really it's a growing movement over the last 20 years. Just to give you an idea of what this means, you find a lot of people like this woman here. She only discovered herself. She only found out she was Black at age 67 because of this same stigma, the same way that Brazilian society, Brazilian families, Brazilian communities teach people you should be anything but Black. Don't define yourself as Black. So many people, this is what I'm saying, what I love about the internet is that these people have the freedom to go online and talk about, some of these things that have taught them not to be Black. Here's another article from, what year is this from? This is from 2013. This one is called When I Took My Blackness Out of the Closet, Denial, Recognition, and Pride. So this is an article written by a man named Igor Faria. And I wanted to highlight this one particular, I'll get into his article in a future date, but let me just read this little section of his article of talking about coming into his Blackness. The thing I want to point out here is that if you notice this guy, I can't really tell, but he does not really look per se light skinned. And this is the point to make is that the stigma of Blackness is such that even people with clearly Black and African phenotypes will walk away from their Black identity. They've been indoctrinated not to accept being Black. So I'll have to read this article again, but I'm quite sure this guy went through a period where he was calling himself a moreno. But in his development of a black identity, this article speaks volumes of his transition. So just this little piece I wanted to read here. Constructing my identity as a black man was complicated. Finding who would introduce me to thinkers and thoughts so that I would grow and in which to base my discourse was very difficult, even in college, because it is a hegemonically white space. But that's another discussion. Even today, with greater access, more constant productions, spaces for different opinions, and the number of people who declare themselves negatives or black has increased. The content does not reach the young man who is constructing and positioning himself. Many still go through a lengthy period of denial of recognizing themselves and finally taking their blackness out of the closet. So this is what he's saying is that even more because of the quota system, you've had tens, if not hundreds of thousands of non-white Brazilians having access to college. But he's saying it's a majority, it's an overwhelmingly a white space, even though that's been changing just because of quotas over the last 2 decades. But even going to college, there was just no people that he could look to support him in this development of finding himself as a black man. Today, you have a lot more black women and men professors in the college ranks. So there's a lot more support for people these days, but there's still a long ways to go. We still have the dominant standard in Brazil, which is to look more European and to run away from having this black identity. Um, so the article that I'm reading today by Stephanie Pies, there are just numerous women who have gone through the same transition. Here's another article from 2017 from the Black Brazil Today blog. Mixed brown girls, mulattas, beige, exotic. No, they are black. Women tell how they discovered being black and the difference it makes in practice. So this is another article with different women defining how they came to see themselves as black after many years of denying this identity. This is Patricia Avelino, and she's telling a little bit about her story. Now, notice again, this woman isn't really light skinned. She's clearly got a brown complexion. She has cabello crespo, she has afro textured hair, but even so, she had problems coming into a black identity. She says, a minha identidade negra, meaning my black identity, began to emerge in 2004 when I began to see other black women such as Negra Lee, who was a singer. At home, my family didn't make an issue of this empowerment, but they always taught me and talked about racism. Before that, I didn't like my hair. And I'm not ashamed to say I didn't like ser negra, being black. I had many problems during childhood and adolescence because I only identified with white women. I only had white friends, and I only liked meninos blancos, meaning white boys. But I was always the school joke. So when I saw that a black woman was beautiful in her naturalness, I wanted to be that way too. I stopped putting chemicals in my hair, but I had a relapse in 2007. Beginning to have relationships, sleeping and waking up with a person, seeing my cabello crespo made me stumble onto this path towards, we'll say, capillary or hair freedom. So many of these stories are just really thought provoking because I know that most of us in the United States we learn from the very beginning to that not only are you black, but you should be proud of this. Where in Brazil, it was kind of the opposite. It was a stigma in many black households. Like, you don't say that you're black. Please don't do that. That's something totally negative. It's not something that's accepted in society. People would accept, racist comments every day. And this is what I'm saying. What's fascinating about where Black Brazilians have come, particularly over the last 2 decades. Let me continue with Stephanie's article. Why so much of a text because of hair? Because there is no inoffensive racist demonstration. Prejudice with cabello crespo can harm people's lives. For those who don't remember the case, give it a read here about the pedagogy intern that was practically forced to straighten or tie her hair up and almost lost her job for, besides not giving in to the pressure from the school where she worked, reporting the case of blatant racism, which ended up in the media. The influence of the same discrimination ending up affecting her professional life. So that's something, this was one of the first big articles on this blog. And I wanted to discuss this a little bit. I'll show the picture of the lady another time, but this is an article from 2011. This is not the woman in question here, but she was talking about how she was an intern at, here it is right here. This woman was an intern at a college, Colégio Internacional Aimbi Morumbi in Sao Paulo, in the neighborhood of Brooklyn, located on Michigan Street. Yeah, it's common you find there's a neighborhood in Sao Paulo called Brooklyn, and there's several streets you'll find in Sao Paulo named after American states. That's something I found intriguing as I got to know the city. But anyway, according to Esther Eliza da Silva Cesario, a black woman that started working in the marketing sector of the school on November 1st, she was told that the director of the school wanted to meet her in her office. In the days leading up to the meeting, she continuously received messages that she should tie up her hair and avoid walking through the hallways. In the meeting, the director said, "How can you represent the college with this kinky hair? The standard here is straight hair." The director went on to say how, quote unquote, bad the woman's hair was and that she needed to straighten it in order to maintain the school's standards. Cesario also said that after she revealed the details of the meeting with other workers at the college, she began to receive threats. The workers stood in solidarity with her and detailed that after the incidents, they found Cesario in the bathroom in tears. So, this is the immense pressure that people have in Brazil when they choose to want to wear their hair natural. This is just the tip of the iceberg. As I said, this was one of the first articles you'll find on Black Brazil Today. It's I can't say shocking. You know, you live in the United States and you read these type of stories and you're familiar with them, but I think a lot of people will identify like, wow, I didn't know this type of thing went down in Brazil. But we hear these stories from all over Latin America. If you look into like Cuba, Venezuela, Colombia, any of these other countries that have black populations due to the transatlantic slave trade, you'll come across these same types of stories. So let's get back to Stephanie's story. In what situation do you imagine that a black woman or man have full security to exercise their profession and to be treated equally when absurdities like this keep happening? Is it they who must learn to straighten or shave their head, bowing to the demands of racism? Or is society that is absurdly impregnated with aesthetic standards that were created with the clear objective of segregation? Is it me that sees problems in everything, quoting imaginary faults in a harmless sentence in the everyday of any woman's life? Or the society that does not realize that these not so offensive phrases are used to destabilize the self esteem and stereotype the figure of Blacks? For you that might eventually read this text and remember that one day these same comments were already made, remember that it is not you that I'm judging. It's the prejudice that I have to battle every day. Remember this the next time you see a Black woman. Remember this when you want to compliment her, and remember not to let the supposed whitening of the Brazilian population make you think that being less Black is to be more beautiful. So again, this is just one of just numerous articles where women of African descent in Brazil are, in some ways, you could say, coming out of the closet in terms of their Blackness. It's been oppressed for so long because of social pressure to whiten their identities, to whiten their physical appearance, and it just got to the point where people just says no more. I'm beautiful the way that I am, and I'm gonna be rocking my hair as it is. This woman, as I said, she went so far as just to cut her. I'll show this in another article that she wrote, where she's being so tired of being subjected, knowing that these compliments were in some ways insults. She just cut her hair off completely. I mean, she had damaged it a lot from the chemicals, but she also realized that by people giving her these compliments of her hair being less kinky or curly, it was in some ways an insult to other people, other Black women who had different textures of hair, who were not, who didn't get the same compliments. All right. Very, it's a powerful essay that she just wrote here, a powerful blog post that I just wanted to cover here. One of thousands here at on the Black Brazil Today blog. So I'm gonna end this here. Definitely feel free to visit the blog if you want to get more of an idea of how Brazilian society deals with the issue of race. That's at blackbraziltoday.com. If you got some out of this video today, definitely give it a thumbs up, share a comment, share the video, subscribe if you think that if you would like to check out more of my videos that's coming in the future. Definitely click on the notification button so that you can be you can be alerted when I post another video because I'm going to try to keep them coming. So with that said, I'm going to end this video and hope to see you guys in the next video.